Welcome back. Today we are making this gorgeous white chocolate raspberry cake. So I'm going to walk you through how we assemble this cake. We're starting off by adding a dab of buttercream onto our grease-proof cake board. I really like to use 10-inch cake boards because we'll be using 7-inch cake layers today, and that gives me a lot of space around the cake, which just makes it easier to pop in and out of the fridge or freezer. So once my cake layer was nice and secured against my cake board, I spread a generous layer of white chocolate buttercream on top of that using a small offset spatula, and then I added some of our raspberry cake filling. I topped this off with some fresh raspberries just to really add a pop of flavor and a little bit of texture, and then I repeated this process as I assembled the cake. To make it a lot easier to spread the raspberry frosting on top of your buttercream, I actually recommend chilling the cake once you add on your buttercream layer. Just pop it in the freezer for about 5 minutes, and it makes it so much easier to have a distinct layer of your filling. For my last cake layer, I always like to flip it upside down just because you know that the bottom and the sides of the cake layer are baked against the pan and that they'll be nice and flat. It just makes it easier to get a little bit sharper corners when you're frosting. I also like to press down a little bit just to make sure that there's no air trapped between the cake layers. So I very carefully added some frosting to the top of the cake and began to work it down the sides to create my crumb coat. You can see I'm really taking my time here because my cake layers weren't really chilled before, and with all of that filling, it's definitely a little bit delicate and I don't want the cake layers to slide. So my advice here is just to take your time, and if needed, you can always insert a dowel into the center to prevent any sliding. While I chilled my crumb coat in the freezer for about 10 minutes, I added some raspberry powder to my remaining white chocolate frosting to create this beautiful raspberry white chocolate frosting. This is just another fun way to incorporate raspberries one more time into this recipe, and I also love the color that it gives the frosting. So I smoothed this using my bench scraper, and you don't have to get this perfect because we're about to use an icing comb, but the more even the frosting is spread, the easier time you'll have creating uniform ridges with your icing comb. So I chose this fun pattern here. As you can see, I'm using a Wilton icing scraper. And once I felt like my ridges were pretty smooth, I began to work on decorating the top of the cake. So I used a Wilton 1M tip to add some fun frosting swirls and kind of a half circle on top of the cake. And on top of that, I added some fresh carnations and raspberries. So carnations are edible, which is great and makes them great for adding to cakes. I chilled the cake for about 10 minutes before adding on my white chocolate ganache strip here. And it's really important that you do that because the ganache is going to be a little bit warm as you add it. And if you don't chill your cake, it can sometimes melt your frosting, especially if you have a cool pattern like we have on our cake here. So be sure that you chill your cake and that your ganache is at the right temperature before you add it. So once our cake was covered in our drips, it was time to do a little taste test. So I could not wait to cut into this cake. I knew it was just packed with so much delicious raspberry flavor, and let me say it did not disappoint. Thank you guys so much for watching this video. If you liked it, be sure to click that like button and leave a comment below. And don't forget, if you want to create this cake, the recipe is up on Chelsweets.com.